Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. I'm flying solo this evening, and you are listening to this. It uploads on August 4th, Monday. Happy Monday to all of you. Recording this on August 3rd, so it's not too old in the evening. And we got some news to get to. We have some exciting things happening this week as far as HBO Hard Knocks' first episode is going to be airing on August 5th. We had the Bills Blue and Red Scrimmage take place on Friday, kind of a ho-hum event. Some James Cook news, a Khalil Shakir injury that popped up during that scrimmage that now seems to be pretty concerning. And then some other things I want to get into tonight as far as like expectations for Dalton Kincaid and some young players on this roster who I think are very important to the success or failure of the 2025 Buffalo Bills. But let's get into the news of the day. The news of the day for me is James Cook. Report came out today that he did not practice. Those on hand could confirm that he was walking around in street clothes. But the story really came after practice when reporters asked James Cook why he wasn't practicing. And he answered in one word, business. And they followed up and asked, will you be practicing tomorrow? And his answer was business. So that's interesting, right? Because so far, James Cook, at least through his actions, has been representative of the team player route. And before I get too into this, I want to say I never fault a player for wanting to get his money. I never fault a player for holding out. I think every situation is different, but so far it sure felt like, at least through his actions, that James Cook was going to be the good soldier, if you will. He showed up to the mandatory training camps. He did show up and was practicing in full at training camp. Today was the first example of him taking more of a hold in approach that we have seen some other players take over the years. In fact, Jordan Poyer took it a couple years back with the Bills. For those that don't know, a hold in is you are on site at training camp. So they cannot fine you for not being there, but you don't really do a whole heck of a lot. So you're there, but you're not really participating. So by him saying business and not classifying it as some sort of an injury, he is letting all of us know that this is a business decision, which is curious because why did you wait until the first week of practice to do this? Well, had those of us wondering what's going on. This is kind of strange. There are some folks out there who I don't necessarily agree with who think that maybe this is a sign that Brandon Beane is trading James Cook. And until that trade is finalized, he doesn't want James Cook to be on the practice field risking injury. Look, I love James Cook. I think he's a fantastic running back. I don't think he's a top 5 running back in the sport, but I don't think he's far off. Um, the fact of the matter is, running backs do not represent great trade assets in the NFL in 2025. You are not going to get Micah Parsons for James Cook. James Cook is a throw-in to any Micah Parsons deal. You'd have to throw in a first-round pick or two and also dump some salary along the way. James Cook is a sweetener to a deal. He is not the focal point of a deal. As good as he is, no running back is worth that much. So an interesting report came out from NFL Network's Tom Pelissero, and he said that this was a unique timing from James Cook because everything he understands is that the Bills and Cook have been in constant communication, including recently, and the sides are not that far apart. Now, that flies in the face of a report we heard late last week where James Cook's side was wanting Saquon Barkley money, and the Bills were basically laughing them out of the room. I like many of you, do not have any interest in giving James Cook or any running back, including Saquon Barkley money. But I do think it's interesting that if that report is not true and Tom Pelissero is accurate in saying that two sides are close, maybe the hold in represents the final oomph to get it over the goal line, so to speak. Like, we're right there. Let's just get it done. What are we arguing about here? Are we talking about a couple million guarantees, whether something's going to be paid out in full or it's going to be a performance bonus? You guys know the dance. That could be where we're at. Maybe as much as I have thought all along, this was heading toward a James Cook is just going to play out the final year of his Bills deal, hit the open market, and then say goodbye to the Bills. And then the Bills will replace him with some combination of Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, if he's still going, and then whatever running back they decide to take in the mid rounds next year. And they keep it churning with cheap running backs, which I am in favor of. But this would seem to indicate that the Bills are certainly exploring, if not close to, a deal with James Cook. And that's fascinating to me. I'm not against signing James Cook. I'm against signing him for Saquon Barkley money because he's not Saquon Barkley and no running back is worth that chunk of your salary cap. But if you go back to the AFC Championship game, James Cook was the best player on the team, and that includes Josh Allen. James Cook had one of the best 4th and goal effort plays that we have seen in a long, long time that kept the Bills in the game. He did not get the ball on the final drive, and his detractors are quick to point out that one of the reasons the final drive had the issues it did is he whiffed on a block when he was on the field that led to a loss of yardage, and the Bills were playing from behind the sticks that drive. So that is a fair point. James Cook has not established himself as a great pass protection back. And when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, an offense like this, that is something you need. But right now, he is one of the few explosive players on this offense. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. But, if you'd asked me 24 hours ago, I would have thought maybe a 10% chance the Bills extend James Cook. After the reporting today, feels like 50-50, maybe even better. So keep an eye on that. We'll keep you alert to everything we're hearing as far as what the national reports are. We certainly are not trying to break news. That didn't work out too well for some podcasts this week. But something else happened this weekend that was noteworthy for the Buffalo Bills. And the guy that many of us, including myself, consider their best receiver, Khalil Shakir, is injured. He has a high ankle sprain. Sean McDermott classified him as week to week. Banged up Bills and Thigh Doctor, who, if you are at all involved in Bills Twitter, those guys are about as good as it gets as far as the local analysis of injuries. Both kind of co-signed that, sure, he can get back on the field by week 1, but it's dicey. And the reality is the Bills might be looking at a situation where they have to start the season without Khalil Shakir. And that's okay because you have to think of the long game. Now, I know who's coming to town week 1, the Baltimore Ravens. I understand that they are a team that the Bills are absolutely going to be competing with for that number 1 seed in the league. And you certainly don't want to drop a game to them right off the bat to start the season. And I don't know if Khalil Shakir would be the difference that I apologize. My phone is going off. I am trying to get my do not disturb on and we're good to go. But the long game is Khalil Shakir needs to be healthy 100% by the time the playoffs roll around. And if that means he has to miss the first month of the season, I wouldn't think it would be that long. That is what's in the best interest for the Buffalo Bills. But that brings us back to a larger point. The larger point here is many of us hated this wide receiver group before Khalil Shakir got hurt. Hated is a strong word, but I'm not a fan of this wide receiver group. I think Khalil Shakir is a nice player. I think he's a dog. I think he's fantastic after the catch. He's reliable underneath. He's got great hands. He's always where you want him to be, but he doesn't have any superhuman physical skill set that makes him what I would consider to be an alpha of a room. Josh Palmer, to me, has always been just a guy. I know there's a segment of people that want to tell you, like, oh, he's an elite route runner, and maybe that is his best strength as a receiver. I would sign off on that, and I do think he gets the deep ball fairly well. But he's still Joshua Palmer. And there were ample opportunities last year with the Chargers to make a name for himself, and he didn't do that. And they had to dust off Quentin Johnston. And maybe he'll come here and surprise us. Maybe this will be a Nico Collins situation all over again where a change of scenery leads to somebody exploding onto the scene. I would love to be wrong about Joshua Palmer. But now you're down to Keon Coleman, who I think had an up and down rookie season. Still has some weaknesses to his game, still struggling with the dropsies as far as camp goes, but by all accounts is having a better than good camp, I guess we could say. But Curtis Samuel's been injured. Joshua Palmer's doing some drills, but he's not practicing in full. Khalil Shakir could miss the rest of the summer. Now you're down to Keon Coleman. Caden Prather, the rookie 7th round pick that people forget about for good reason, is out right now. Elijah Moore? I mean, there's an Elijah Moore hive out there, folks. I get it. But the fact that he's your most proven wide receiver right now, and he's the only one standing next to Keon Coleman with any kind of NFL track record, That's a little scary. Um, that brings up a couple of questions for the Bills. One, there's a simple answer. There's a free agent available by the name of Gabe Davis, who certainly is familiar with the quarterback Josh Allen. Um, he's coming off of a very disappointing season after signing a big contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He did not play his best football. He was fighting injuries. And I think that makes a lot of sense, honestly, depending on the price tag you can get him for. I think it's cheap insurance. I think it's smart insurance. I never thought Gabe Davis was a high-end wide receiver too, like many thought he was. I thought there was too much limitation to his game, but I think the conversation went way too far the other way and was completely disrespectful to what kind of a useful weapon he was for this team. And at this point, when the Bills need bodies, to have somebody with a proven track record with this quarterback available, it makes sense. What kind of money is he looking for? I don't know. You hear things out there. Again, I'm not breaking news. That is not my game, but you hear chatter out there that he would prefer to be in Florida. And that may be why he went to Jacksonville. Who knows? And maybe, the Jacksonville thing didn't work out. You can't just only pick the Florida teams, but maybe he doesn't want to come back to Buffalo. I don't know. I'm certainly not saying I've talked to Gabe Davis about that. But it makes a lot of sense to me. The other thing the Bills could look at is a trade. And one name that became available this week is Terry McLaurin, the fantastic wide receiver of the Washington Commanders. But that would be one of those things where you instantly go to Greg Tomset's Twitter from Cover One and you figure out how can the Bills do it. Well, I'm not going to bore you with the numbers reading it. I'm not saying what Greg does is boring, but it's much better to read them than to listen to somebody explain it to you. But what I will tell you is, in the words of Kevin Garnett, anything is possible. If the Bills want Terry McLaurin, they can get Terry McLaurin. If the Bills want Micah Parsons, they can get Micah Parsons financially. Can they offer enough trade compensation for either one of those players to outbid or to interest the Dallas Cowboys or the Washington Commanders? Who knows? Who knows what Jerry Jones is doing over there, by the way? Holy cow. But it's not a financial issue with those guys. The Bills can always crunch the numbers and make it work. I think I'm not overreacting to Khalil Shakir being injured. But what I am saying is take a look at what happens when he's gone. Look at this room. Look at this group. Without him, boy, oh boy, does it look dicey. Let's take him out of the mix for a second. Keon Coleman, Joshua Palmer, Elijah Moore. Does that sound like a Super Bowl set of skill players? And folks, I get it. The Bills had a great season last year with Josh Allen throwing to you and me out there at wide receiver. But that is not the recipe for success. Do not turn down the opportunity to get better weapons. And do not underestimate opposing defense's abilities to figure out how to stop non-game changing receivers. So if you get a chance to add a Terry McLaurin to this group, I realize everybody eats was just the mantra of the Bills last year. You never knew whose week it was going to be, but you can add Terry McLaurin there. I'm just fine with him eating every week and everybody else just getting what they get. So that's where I'm at. I've been there. I've been there before Khalil Shakir got hurt. I've been there before the draft. Luke and I have been there for 2 years. We were on the draft Brian Thomas Jr. Sweepstakes. Last year, we were screaming for a wide receiver. Keon Coleman was not either one of our favorite ideas. We wanted A.D. Mitchell even more than Xavier Worthy. I think Luke liked Xavier Worthy a little better, but that's neither here nor there. We've been wanting receiver, wanting receiver, wanting receiver. And again, this year, we wanted receiver. Luther Burden was our favorite idea. And then, of course, the Bills obviously didn't do that. They get paid a lot more than Luca and I do for Bills Chat to make these decisions. And so far, their track record is pretty good when it comes to putting together championship caliber teams. But I think that this Bills team needs to look at this Khalil Shakir situation as a wake-up call, because right now there's no reason to think Khalil Shakir is not going to come back and be a very important part for this team. But this was a good exercise for the Bills. Take him out of the mix. What does it look like? Who are you going to throw the ball to? Because there is nothing to say that come November, come December, he doesn't go down again. And what are you left with? You're left with Joshua Palmer, who's never done anything noteworthy in the league besides a couple of cool PFF charts. You're left with Elijah Moore, who's on his third team, despite I like the player, but there's a reason why the guy is probably on his third team and had to wait till the summer to sign a deal. You're left with Keon Coleman, who up and down, and just inconsistency so far, wasn't considered an elite prospect, and who knows what you have there. And then Curtis Samuel, who did have a good playoff run for the Bills, but he's already hurt again. And then you get to Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid. He was supposed to be the straw that stirs the drink in this offense. He was supposed to be, when they traded up to get him 2 years ago, the Travis Kelce type player in this offense. I'm not saying he should be Travis Kelce. Those guys do not come around very often. But Dalton Kincaid was, for lack of a better term, supposed to do for this offense what Brock Bowers did for the Raiders. Come in, be the guy, and everybody else just kind of fits in. And last year, when they had the same kind of group of receivers, Dalton Kincaid did not distinguish himself. Now, look, he had some injuries last year. I do not think that these injuries are necessarily predictive of future injuries. Um, and when you look at some of his yards per target numbers, he's a very efficient player when he gets targeted. So the simple answer is, hey, just target him more. But it's not as simple as that. And I put a question out on Twitter, and we got a lot of responses to it. I want to go through some of them now. What are your expectations for Dalton Kincaid coming into year 3? Because it's been up and down. The rookie year was fine. He was outshined by Sam Laporta, but, Sam Laporta had an all-time season until Brock Bowers showed up. But we got some good responses here, and I'll tell you where I'm at here in a second too. But Matthew Cross, our buddy Costa, says, not sure about expectations due to his known injury he was dealing with last year, but if the Bills decide to increase his 5.5 targets per game to at least 6.5 or 7, we could be cooking with gas. And I agree with that. But then you have to ask yourself, why? If it was that simple, why wouldn't they do it? And Costa certainly understands this. But the reason is because right now, Dalton Kincaid is a liability as a pass blocker and a run blocker. So you almost have to leave him on the field in exclusive passing situations. Well, guess what the defense is going to do if you do that? They're going to know if Kincaid's on the field, you're passing. If he's not on the field, there's a better chance that you're running. Then you become predictable, and good luck moving the ball. The Bills need Dalton Kincaid to be a more well-rounded player at tight end. He can't just be a big slot, because then you have a souped-up Mike Gesicki in there that you traded up to get. I like Mike Gesicki, but holy cow, you don't trade up in the first round to get Mike Gesicki. So I think it's on Dalton Kincaid. Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott said as much in their exit interviews last year, their postseason press conferences. He needs to get stronger. By all accounts, he has. But this is a big season for Kincaid. A lot of people, lasting memory of him is dropping a football to end the AFC Championship game that did hit him in the chest. But I think that the route he took to get there was, a little deceiving with what kind of a drop it was. MFAM Ismailis, one of our favorites, one of our most active Twitter friends, says, I love Kincaid, so I'd love to see him take a leap this season. Kayla, again, one of our favorites. Kayla AF. Follow her on Twitter too, by the way. She's fantastic out there. Have a year just as good as or incrementally better than his rookie season. That's a great point by Kayla, by the way. I think a lot of people forget just how good he was his rookie season. And that's because he was outshined by Laporta, who was taken after him. And it was very easy to connect those dots. You know how it works in sports. Why didn't we take Laporta? It's not always apples to apples. Take a step forward, says Texas Tano Stan 99. He and Keon Coleman both have opportunities in the receiving core with so many of the other players dinged up. That's a great point. Right now, the veterans the Bills have brought in to solve these issues are gone. If Khalil Shakir is a veteran, at this point, he's on his second contract. He's a veteran. He's a homegrown veteran, but he's a veteran. They brought in Joshua Palmer. He's barely practicing. Curtis Samuel is not practicing. Kincaid and Coleman have got to step up. If they play to the expectations that the Bills had of them when they spent the first pick in the second round on Coleman and traded up in the first round for Kincaid, everything else will be just fine. Keon Coleman is still a pup. He was coming on in the Seattle game. He got hurt, and it was very, very roller coaster-ish from there on out, and it's been roller coaster-ish in training camp so far. I do not care about training camp as long as you don't get hurt. We'll see what happens when the games start. A couple more of your answers here. Catch the football when it hits his hand, says Chris in the 716. You know, I get it, Chris. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that when he came in to the NFL, he was considered one of the best set of hands in the entire class and one of the best tight end set of hands that we've seen in a while. I don't think that's gonna continue to be a bugaboo of his. I think last year he was dealing with some injuries, and it forced him off of his spot there. The other topic I wanna get into tonight is young players. First and second year players in the Bills, and we've talked a little bit about Keon Coleman because we know where this team's bread is buttered, right? We know Josh Allen. We know the linebacking group with Milano and Bernard and how they have Dorian Williams behind them, who obviously is a very good backup. We know Taron Johnson and Christian Benford should be just fine at corner. What happens on the other side, we shall see. We know that they have just invested over and over in defensive line, whether it's premium draft picks every single year or high free agency dollars every single year, that they should have more results at the defensive line than they saw last year in the AFC Championship game when they couldn't get Patrick Mahomes to the ground when they were playing with you and me at offensive line. And then obviously Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins gives the Bills one of the best tackle tandems in the entire sport. And we just talked about how good James Cook is. But when you talk about young players in this team, and let's specifically talk about first and second year players. So the rookie class this year and the rookie class last year. Who playing to their peak would be not playing to their peak? I wanna ask that differently because I think you could kinda, like, get a little cheesy with that answer. Which second first or second year player is most important to the Bills' success in 2025? To me, it comes down to 2 players. To me, it comes down to Cole Bishop or Max Hairston. I'm gonna say Keon Coleman probably deserves more consideration, but what I will say about that is I do have confidence that this team will be able to function offensively at a high level because of Josh Allen, even if for whatever reason Keon Coleman turns out to be a bust. He's not trending toward being a bust, by the way. But if he ends up being nothing for this team, I still think they'll probably be just fine at receiver or just kind of where they're at. I thought about TJ Sanders because he has such a unique interior pass rush skill set that really nobody other than Ed Oliver presents on this team, and to have him be able to rotate in and even play next to, at times, Ed Oliver is something this team has not had. They obviously love him the way they trade up aggressively for him in the draft, and but the reason why I didn't say him is they just took so many kicks at the can on interior defensive line the last 2 years. They took Dwayne Carter. They took the other kid out of Kentucky in the 4th round, and then that doesn't even go on to say that all the defensive ends they've taken. They've taken Javon Solomon. They've taken Landon Jackson. They signed Hoyt. So there's just an influx of dollars out there spent at the defensive line. So it feels like even if it's not TJ Sanders, it could be somebody else. So I'm back with Harrison and Bishop, and I end up landing on Bishop, and here's why. I feel more confident that if Harrison doesn't work out, and maybe part of this is me overcompensating for the fact that he may not be back until the season starts. So it seems like it's a lost cause expecting him to win that job at this point. I feel more confident in Tre'Davious White holding it down opposite Christian Benford for as long as it takes for Harrison to get up to speed. And if that means it's the entire season, you still have Dane Jackson behind him, who is at this point a luxury as a depth to the depth of a boundary cornerback, a guy that has as many starts in the system as he has. I think the Bills are okay at cornerback depth. Do I love it? No. I would have loved them to go out and sign Jair Alexander. I was pounding the table for it, but it didn't happen. I think they're probably better off at cornerback. But what I don't want to see is another season of DeMar Hamlin starting at safety for this team. I want to see the Bills get back to some of the things they were able to do under Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, which obviously I'm not saying Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp are either one of those players, but the way the Bills could disguise their defensive coverages, the way that they could change the picture for the quarterback post snap from what he saw pre snap. And we heard about some of that with Bishop and Rapp, but now Rapp is hurt and Bishop is hurt. And that's kind of the story of Taylor Rapp. And to be honest, it's been kind of the story of Cole Bishop. Cole Bishop has to come through. This is a player they don't have a lot of depth at. Position, excuse me. This is a player they are counting on. We can't go back to the DeMar Hamlin well. That would be a fail. I would rather, honestly, um, see Jordan Hancock or Cam Lewis out there than another season of DeMar Hamlin. He's just a very limited player. And if that makes me sound coarse to you based on what he went through, I'm sorry. But it's not my job. It's not I would be doing you a disservice if I romanticized the player because of the situation and told you he was better than I thought he was. I don't have to be right, but I don't think DeMar Hamlin is a player that you're going to be able to hide enough to get as far as you need to go. We saw last year in the AFC Championship game when DeMar Hamlin kept getting picked on. Kyer Elam also, but they matched him up on Xavier Worthy. They matched him up on Travis Kelsey. Those are tough matchups for anybody, but holy cow, was he a fish out of water in those situations. I'm not saying Cole Bishop could cover either one of those guys, but he has the athletic profile to at least have a fighting shot. So to me, it's Cole Bishop. I think Maxwell Harrison is another interesting player. And I think Brandon Beane's track record as a drafter is a little unfair because he does pick so late in these drafts since Josh Allen has hit his peak in 2020. It's been late 20s, early 30s for these picks. It's hard to find blue chippers there, and he's found a couple. Christian Benford. I think Greg Rousseau is a blue chipper. I really like Khalil Shakir for a day 3 pick, but it's these first round picks that really have kind of left you wanting more, and you just can't keep missing on those. So whether it's Keon Coleman, whether it's Maxwell Harrison this year, whether it's TJ Sanders just hitting the ground running and really improving this interior pass rush, or whether it's somebody like Walker or, Dwayne Carter's still there, somebody we're not even expecting, Javon Solomon hits the ground running and just comes in his second year and sets the world on fire. I don't know. Um, the Bills need some more from a couple of their young guys. And depending on what happens with James Cook, maybe Ray Davis is your answer, and that's fine. So where do we go from here? Hard Knocks is going to be airing on, let me get the exact date here. I don't want to guess on that. Bear with me. When is the first episode of Hard Knocks Bills? The first episode of Hard Knocks is going to premiere Tuesday, August 5th. That'll be interesting, right? Like, that'll give us all an up close and personal look at what the Bills have been going through at training camp. You should get a look at some of the meeting rooms, I think it'll be fascinating to see how McDermott and Bean interact, how McDermott runs his coaching meetings. If you remember back to some of these old episodes of Hard Knocks, I remember the Brown situation where it was just cringe, like how the coaching meetings felt. So, um, I think that'll be interesting. I feel like my gut tells me McDermott's going to come off a lot more personable than people think. Maybe not. He's very guarded in front of the media. Maybe he's guarded in front of Hard Knocks. I get the sense that behind closed doors, McDermott is much more of a, for lack of a better term, guy's guy. Um, Brandon Beane is fantastic in front of the camera. I mean, he comes off as just a person you'd want to have a beer with at the bar when he's on McAfee or whatever show he's on, Rich Eisen, whatever. I'm sure he will be great. And we all know what an absolute gem of a personality Josh Allen is. And then we have, the guys on the roster like Tre'Davious White, Keon Coleman, Deion Dawkins, who are just going to absolutely shine in this setting. Like, we can't wait for the world to find out what these guys are all about. Um, I am curious to see how much access HBO gets because the Bills have done a good job with their Bills embedded. I'll give them credit. Like, we get inside their draft room. It is what it is. Like, every single draft day story is just this high fives and chest bumps. Like, they couldn't believe that they were able to go get that guy. And I get it. Like, you wouldn't want to show a reaction where Brandon Beane was mad that somebody he wanted didn't fall to him. But overall, I think the Bills, website, BuffaloBills.com does a great job with those Buffalo Bills embedded, giving us access to that. I am curious to see what happens on Hard Knocks. This James Cook story is certainly gonna be something to monitor. All the injuries the Bills are dealing with is going to be something to monitor. I do wonder how much they're gonna dive into, whether McDermott should be on the hot seat, and you just know. I mean, it feels like to me, especially with now the injury to Shakir, they're gonna go back to that Brandon Beane WGR segment, where he basically roasted Jeremy White and Joe DiBiase for suggesting that the Bills should have drafted a wide receiver. And, I like to consider myself fair, and it is what it is. You don't have to care about my opinion. I thought Brandon Bean came off pretty poorly in that interview because I didn't think that anything Jeremy or Joe said that morning warranted that reaction, and I thought it was a fair question. And it felt like Brandon Bean just kind of came into that situation looking for a reason to pick a fight, looking for a reason to be offended versus like legitimately reacting to what was going on. But it sure made him a cult hero around the league. Like, look at this GM standing up for himself. But man, like as cool as that was for him in the spring and the fall, if we see some games like we saw against the Texans where the Bills can't move the ball, or the Ravens in the regular season where the Bills can't move the ball because they can't separate, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough on him, and that's gonna be replayed in a way that he's not gonna be as proud of. But, he set the table for that. That was his decision. It's a big boy sport. He can certainly wear that. I don't think he's on the hot seat by any means. I mean, unless this team just plummets, which it's hard to imagine with the state of this division. It feels like at worst this team will make the playoffs. Um, but yeah, we are 2 weeks now into training camp. The final thing I want to get into though, there was some discourse about the blue and red scrimmage, about how Josh Allen came out and threw some passes to the fans and didn't do a lot on the field. I am taking my daughter. I live in the Midwest. Okay. I live in the Midwest. I don't live in Buffalo. Luca lives in Buffalo. I'm taking my daughter to the Bills Giants preseason game. She is 10 years old. Plane ticket, hotel room, really good seats. I don't want to see Josh Allen play in that game. I understand going in that even though this is an expensive trip, that this was a better idea for me for my daughter's first chance and last chance to see Highmark Stadium in her life for a preseason setting. She's 10 years old. She doesn't have the attention span to sit there for 3 hours. She's going to want to explore the stadium. She's want to get up and look around, go buy some toys. If that's happening and the Bills are playing the Bengals in December and Joe Burrow is on the 10-yard line and she's like, "Dad, I want to go to the bathroom." I mean, I'm gonna be like, "You better pee your pants because the Bills need me right now to yell loudly." I wouldn't make her pee her pants. Let's just get that clear. But that's a long way of saying that I can feel what people are feeling as far as like we paid for the experience. But look, the Bills are a championship caliber team. They have a championship caliber quarterback. If they decide that they don't want Josh Allen participating in some function of training camp, I support it. Now, look, could they have picked a better opportunity than the blue and red scrimmage to pull Josh Allen back? I think so. I was a little confused why they chose that opportunity instead of camp, but no matter what, you give him a day off, folks are not going to be happy, but you have to protect Josh Allen. You have to manage his arm. And the other reality of this is the Bills have a competition going at quarterback too between Mitch Trubisky and Mike White, who have both started games in this league. And they may want to see as many reps in that environment, in that stadium, with those guys running with the ones. But Josh Allen's not 23 years old anymore. You don't need him throwing every important pass of every important training camp practice because fans bought tickets to be there. And I think that while I understand the frustration of some, like, you got to see Josh Allen. He trotted out there in his normal red helmet. He played catch with the fans. He was out there. Is your life really that much different because you didn't get to see him run a couple of 7-on-7 drills? Like, that's where, to me, I'm an old, I'm in my 40s now. Maybe my 20-year-old self would have thought differently. I don't know. But to me, this is kind of much ado about nothing. Like, we got bigger fish to fry. This is a team that's been one play away against the Chiefs 4 times in the playoffs. 2, 3 times. And they were not one play away in the first AFC Championship game. One play away against the Chiefs 3 times in the playoffs. Like, they got to figure out how to get that done, not be more entertaining in July and August. So I applaud the Bills for that. And I understand people's frustrations, but I think there's other things to be frustrated about. So I think that's going to do it for this week. Kind of a shorter episode. I'm excited to break down Hard Knocks. Excited to get Luca back next week, and we'll obviously by the next time we chat, we'll have a preseason game in the books as the New York Football Giants are coming to town. We should get a good look at Jackson Dart. Malik Neighbors, one of the most exciting young players in the league. Although I can't imagine he's going to play too much in that game. One of my draft crushes, Jalen Hyatt, should get some good run in that game. Brian Dayball's back. We'll see a lot of Mitch Trubisky and Mike White, I would assume. At this point, it seems like we won't be seeing much of Khalil Shakir, obviously. Maybe not any James Cook. That's fine. I don't want to see anybody that's important anyway in these preseason games, but at least we'll have that to break down. We'll have Hard Knocks to break down. We'll have Luca's opinion on all of it. I'll have my experience from traveling to Buffalo and where we went to eat and all that stuff. I always love sharing that when I get to make it in there. I'm going back later this year, more of a guy's trip without the kids. And I look forward to that. But that's going to do it. I am Josh McCarty. Uh, I will talk to you next week on Bill's Chat with Luca. Please take a moment if you're watching on YouTube to like and subscribe. It helps us out so much. And if you do so, you give yourself an opportunity to win a Keon Coleman signed helmet. So that's going to do it. We will talk to you next week.